this feeling I can't leave. I'm walking and I'm dreaming. Will you dare to give it all up and walk by my side? Do you see the road? Do you hear it's cold? Do you want a part of it? Just getting me apart now.
Hello everybody, I'm Jason Bainbridge. I'm your host on State of the Nation, and this week we've got a very special guest, a young lady named Pamela Taylor, who is a freedom fighter, now become a candidate for the Mayor of Dunedin, of all places. Dunedin, the land of lovely sea lions. Good morning to you, Miss Pamela Taylor.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you.
Thank you very much. We've already had a little chat this morning. So it's very interesting to hear some of your experiences. And actually, first off, before you got into politics, you were a freedom fighter. How did you get involved in the freedom fighting movement per se?
Oh, you flatter me with calling me a freedom fighter. I like to see myself as a human rights defender. Now, I became more strongly interested in politics during the time that the country of New Zealand all was placed under house arrest for a suspended period of time. This increased my awareness of what the policies were happening and how they're influencing everybody's daily lives. Now, I participated in the Wellington protest on the grounds that I was extremely concerned about the violation of human rights, and I was concerned about the direction that my country was heading in. We had a very quiet summer season where my family was discriminated against. We couldn't attend the local swimming pools, the local library, the cafes, the restaurants, or go to the sporting and recreational facilities. And so I went to the Wellington protest to try to restore our human rights so that we were able to fully participate inside our community without experiencing discrimination.
Yeah, I thought that was very terrible of the government, to be honest. The way that they're carrying on with all of this. And it does seem isolated to the Western governments now, maybe with the exception of Japan, possibly. But it really does seem to be a Western goal to demoralize the nation and to extract away their freedoms. And this is a big, important issue, their freedoms. Now, running for mayor, what do you think some of the solutions could be to this conundrum?
Well, we seem to have a global government kind of imposing onto our national government, which is then imposing on our local government these suffocating, oppressive regulations. Now, as Mayor of Dunedin, I'd like to protect the city and the people of the city from some of those oppressive regulations. So there are, one of the things I would be interested in is stopping three waters. So this is a case where the New Zealand Government Corporation, which is foreign owned through shareholders, is wanting to seize $35 billion of New Zealand ratepayers' assets in the way of our stormwater, our fresh water, and our sewage. Now, this $35 billion of assets has been paid for over generations of New Zealanders. And by transferring it from local city councils to the New Zealand Government Corporation, it is essentially removing it from the control, the hands, and the ownership of everyday New Zealanders into a New Zealand Government Corporation, which has got foreign shareholders. So I'm deeply concerned about that theft of our assets. I'm also concerned that with three waters, I believe it would be likely to increase our utility bills for water by quite possibly $1,500 per year. At the same time as doing this, they've snuck through a few dodgy legislations. They've actually moved through a fresh water bill very recently. Now, this one is saying that the person who has control over the assets owns it, and it's introducing all these brand new regulations on what needs to go into the water, how it's meant to be safe. So we're actually transferring it from, in that fresh water bill, it states that the water assets are all owned by a particular person. I believe each and every New Zealander should own their own water, and because it's a human right to be able to drink water, and we should not be transferring all that water infrastructure and the ownership of water over to foreigners, for example. The other thing is they've introduced a new regulatory system for the water just very recently. Now, this regulatory system that's been set up doesn't own the water, but it's meant to regulate and control, and everybody's meant to apply to them for the purpose of collecting water off your roof, or out of your well, or the river or creek, or from the local town water supply. So that's these sorts of regulations on the water is going to make it a lot harder for everyday New Zealanders to access water, to feed their cows, to water their gardens, and to have showers.
I couldn't imagine living in that situation, to be honest. I mean, I started seeing this a few years ago. I've been living in Asia pretty much almost full time since 1999. So I've been able to sit back and watch New Zealand just basically decline over a good 22 years. And I did notice that I think water is the latest in the game, not collecting the rainwater, but it started out probably around 2013, 2014 when they wanted to turn the country into Bolivia, basically. And they wanted to stop people from having a garden, or maybe not so much having a garden, but if your neighbor gives you, some carrots they grew in their garden, they were trying to make it illegal. I think it's that kind of overreach that is driving the country down the drain. And I think having your own private water, I couldn't imagine not having my own water. We have groundwater here.
In the New Zealand city water supply, currently the Ministry of Health has control over what's meant to go in there. And so we're meant to put 57 different chemicals in there. One of them is including fluoride. Now, fluoride is meant to lower your IQ, as well as causing degenerative bone issues. So there's quite a lot of concern about having these foreign or these particular people dictating what has to go into your water, when there might be scientific research papers strongly suggesting and applying over and over again that it's bad for your health to be consuming those particular drugs and chemicals, and yet it's still going in.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't I wouldn't drink tap water if you paid me to. Not at all. The whole idea of fluoridation, I mean, is crazy. It's like, trust DDT. It's from the old days when DDT was good. Doctors recommended Marlboros, and of course, fluoride is good for you. It's like, what kind of crazy system are we in now? Because we've gone from like the 50s and the 60s, from total lunacy when Coca-Cola had cocaine in it and everything was fine. And then we went through the 60s, 70s, and the 80s and the 90s, cleaning up everything, getting back into normal science, and things were kind of telling the truth. And now we've gone into the 2020s, and everything's just gone haywire and off the charts and completely upside down. What do you suggest could happen with the general wokeness of society and the media at the moment? What do you have in store for people in the media industry if you were a mayor?
I have concerns that the media isn't very good at speaking the truth. So we have this political correctness, which has just gone so far off to the crazy land that it's actually causing the population not to be able to discuss, talk about, and think clearly and solve their problems. For example, we have under the PC language, there's some people that don't even know what a woman is. So there is clear things where there's facts, there's biological differences, and yet because of the particular narrative of the day, we're struggling to even talk about the most basic, obvious things. So I'm of the opinion that the media lies in order to keep getting paid from the people who own the media companies. So in New Zealand, we had $55 million spent from the New Zealand Government Corporation, or Jacinda, to pay the media to promote their narrative. There was also $21 million, I think it was, used for promoting the COVID-19 vaccine and health narrative. So this is a lot of taxpayers' money being spent to promote a certain agenda. There's also money coming in to kind of promote the climate change narrative. There's the race baiting narrative. So these particular slants on the discourse that we're allowed to discuss the world that we live in is very biased.
I saw this taking place early. Well, actually, the woke thing has been going on for a while now. It was mainly highlighted by Disney and Marvel and changing out all the characters and canceling the stuff that we grew up with. I was born in 1973, so I'm nearly 50 now. I'm not sure when you were born, but all the stuff, all the things that we held dear when we were young people, they've now just been cancelled out completely, and they've tried to sort of demoralize the masculine and have these raging, woke, extreme feminists try and demoralize masculinity and demoralize the man's position in media and in the home and in society. Do you think the media has a lot to do with promoting this?
I think there may be a sinister agenda behind some of the media narratives. Now, they are being paid from some of the wealthiest, most influential, upper-class people in the world who are controlling the mainstream media of the world, because knowledge is power. So if you can keep the population dumbed down or not having the full truth or not being able to discuss it properly, then that means you're able to get ahead with your own agendas, because the rest of the people are going off slightly the wrong direction. So if you were a ruler and you had tons and tons of money, then perhaps you don't want the lower class and the middle class trying to threaten your massive reserves of money that you're collecting off them. So therefore you get the lower and middle classes to fight against each other and cause division. They also possibly don't want the unification of people of all different, every race and every creed, because that threatens the power structure. And so their power is based on the concept that we're distracted by all these other things going on. So I suspect the real agenda behind climate change is not that CO2 is polluting the planet. That's a fake story. The thing is that when we go to electric cars, then we get some people to become super, super rich. And we've got a worse product. Those batteries end up dying and wasting or exploding in about 7 years. So that means you need to purchase another car. So this means the electric car manufacturers have become very prosperous, and the lower and middle classes that are forced to buy those products end up suffering. Once upon a time, it was normal for one man to go to work and for him to have a wife, about 3 or 4 or 5 children, and a house, have a car, and they lived a prosperous, happy, well life. At the moment, we have 1 in 5 New Zealand children living in poverty. There's food insecurity, and the wage of one person can hardly pay for the rent. So we've actually had a massive economical wealth transfer from the middle class, the small businesses, the farmers, everybody that does everything productive in our society, and the lower class. That wealth has been transferred over to the upper class, and the weapon of doing this is by putting a misleading message through the media to deceive people. So for the pharmaceutical companies, I can't quite remember the number at the moment, but maybe it was something like 47 billion, maybe it was what they earned in the past year. So they marketed a product through the media network. They had politicians marketing it. this product wasn't tested to be safe or effective, and the politicians and the health officials and the news media marketed it for free for them. They actually then had zero liability in case somebody was harmed by their product. Then they also were exempt from paying tax. And so what happened in this scenario is the money from the middle class, the lower class, or everyday New Zealanders were transferred over to pharmaceutical companies that had made a product that they had never tested, that was not safe, that was not effective. They weren't liable for any damages, and it was marketed and campaigned and advertised with taxpayers' monies to try to manipulate the consent of the people to try this new drug.
That's quite a lot that you unpacked there. First of all, climate change, we can just go directly to Maurice Strong, the father of climate change. They call him the man without a country. And his auntie, actually, surprisingly enough, was an assistant or an advisor to Chairman Mao in China during the rise of Chairman Mao. And Deng Xiaoping, that was his name, Deng Xiaoping. Rumor has it that he is the love child of that woman and Deng Xiaoping, who was the number 2 in China. So that goes all the way back, Maurice Strong. Absolutely sure about that. And the whole idea of transferring the wealth is absolutely correct. There is a huge financial transfer. And the lockdowns were the first way to start to take people's jobs away. So anybody who had almost no money, definitely had no money once the lockdown started. And also it's designed to wean them onto the universal basic income system.
A lot of these themes, like trying to attack the farmers, trying to attack the landlords, trying to make it harder for small business owners, these are actually creative destruction. The different ways to try to break, they're trying to demoralize masculine men, trying to demoralize feminine women. It's all just an attack on the person from lots of different angles in order to demoralize us and weaken us so we don't know our true identity, our true strength, and have the courage to stand up against this oppressive system that they're trying to push in on top of us.
I've lived in Japan. I lived in China. I wasn't sure about that. I was a bit nervous before I went there because I'd never been to a communist country before. And when I got there, I felt, oh, this is very much like Tokyo, you know? And then after a few years, I stayed in China for 7 years. And they were heading towards democracy, believe it or not. 2012, Christmas, when Hu Jintao and Xi Jinping transferred over the power base as the leader of the country, Xi Jinping said that they were going to soft democracy with Chinese characteristics. And then something happened on the way around 2015, 2016. And then suddenly China reversed that, and there's some kind of internal problem going on there. But even this form of globalism freaks out the communists, to be honest, because I do have a lot of friends who are communists, and they say that this just takes the cake. This is far more weird and beyond even good old communism and socialism. This technocratic dictatorship globalism, this is far more genocidal. But they do it with a smile all the way.
Yes, and from a spiritual perspective, it seems that we have those who are, there's always a battle between good and evil. There's good forces and there's evil forces. There's people with good motives and people with bad motives. Now, this is both, lots of people, like 85% of the world, happen to believe in some form of God. And with this belief in God, there's also a belief in Satan. So what happens is, according to biblical sources, Satan is the one who wants to steal, kill, and destroy, and oppress the people. Now, and the biblical examples, Jesus is the one who is the way, the truth, and life, and wants you to have life in abundance. So this good versus evil battle is kind of playing out on this global scale. I think the parallels are quite strong. This globalist group appear to be quite keen on oppressing the people, and a lot of their policies seem to be even about depopulating us. So, and there's also policies about stealing our resources, stealing our private property. There's got managed retreat, there's areas of natural significance, there is all these building regulations. It's like regulation upon regulation in order to steal the property and the property rights from the individuals and transfer the water, the politics, the universities, the buildings and everything over to this foreign entity. So with their, it does seem to have quite a pro-deep approach to this globalism, because they keep mentioning how they'd like population control or depopulation. When they talk about population control or depopulation, they've been doing studies into this, and I've got it written down that they do population control, depopulation studies, which is incredibly an evil agenda. So it's devaluing of the human life, the human soul, the human body, human rights. It's devaluing the dignity of the individual. So they're promoting things like abortion. So instead of viewing it as in the baby has a right to life, and that it's been created in the image of God, and from the moment of conception it's got a heart and a soul imparted into it from the Almighty God of life, they're viewing it as some sort of waste organ that you're just trying to cut out like a cancer from the body.
That's right.
Now, instead of viewing the mature people in our society as wise elders and respecting our grandmas and grandfathers, they're viewing them as people that we ought to just depopulate and do euthanasia so we don't have to pay the pension to them. Instead of viewing the males as being strong masculine men and the females as feminine women, they're viewing them as a negative. They call it toxic masculinity.
Yes.
Or else they're just trying to say that females doing stay-at-home mum are inferior to the ones that are trying to work in the military, for example. So there's this entire agenda which is anti-family, anti-life, anti-human rights, and about stealing, killing, and destroying the human population.
Well, I'm going to ask you to close with your opinion on what's happening in the education system with the critical race theory, the sexualization, and the gaming.
Okay, well, in the New Zealand schools, one of the problems I have with the school is that it's in a classroom and it's not teaching the skills that are most successful for in life. For example, the natural instinct of a young boy is to be out and about and exploring and moving around in the environment. A lot of the men in our society end up being the builders of the houses, the farmers, the creators of infrastructure, the truck drivers, the pilots. So the men, the boys, would potentially learn a lot more if they were getting taught more hands-on skills like trades and how to drive and move and stuff. So the schooling systems is not teaching them the skills most useful. For example, for females, the schooling system doesn't teach the home ec how to care for young people, how to cook, or how to plant a garden or look after plants. So these skills, which are so incredibly important, are not being taught in our schools. So the question is what is in the curriculum, and what shouldn't be in the curriculum, and what should be in the curriculum. So the curriculum is about preparing people for life, and I suspect each school should have a garden. Every child should be learning how to plant seeds and see plants grow. I suspect in New Zealand, the school children should be going out to a farm and having a motorbike lessons and learning a bit about the dairy farm industry. This is the primary source of income for our country, and yet the New Zealand children are getting told that farming's bad when it is wonderful. And so the New Zealand children should be out of the classroom, visiting a farm and seeing how to milk a cow and how it operates, so they know this stuff.
That's what we did when we were kids. We did that. Yeah.
And so there's other things like there's The children, I don't believe they should be getting taught about sex, different kinds of sex, or how to have gender changes. This, I think, shouldn't be getting taught in school, but farming, planting, cooking, sewing, building stuff, making stuff, being a mechanic, those sorts of skills should be taught in schools. This critical race thing is demoralizing them, trying to cause division. We're not Maori and non-Maori. That's an incorrect polarization of our world. We are all one human family. We all have the same ancestor. It was Adam and Eve. We're all part of the same family. New Zealand is one big family, and our curriculum should be teaching about the family of all New Zealanders. We're maybe multicultural. We might have different people in our family trees, but there is no reason for teaching conflict between people from slightly different family lines.
What I noticed with critical race theory is that that's exactly what it did in 2020 in the US. I saw a lot of really terrible images coming out of blue states in the US and what they call the Summer of Love in the US summer of 2020, when after this George Floyd thing came out, the guy who turned out to be a porn star and a drug user, and suddenly we're all feel sorry for the guy, one of the worst people in society. But that's what critical race theory did when I saw young people of color going around bashing up other kids. And that's what it contributed to. Black Lives Matter came out at that point, right? So it gave them a free pass to go around and just beat up and demoralize anybody, So, and I saw that very, very actively in the US. I watched a lot of this content in the Summer of Love into 2020. Now, the thing here is, before we go off, I've been thinking about this recently. And I think that there is, and I'm generally a capitalist, okay? Actually, I'm more of a humanist than anything else. I'm more of a humanist. I'm not into Marxism or socialism or communism or capitalism. I'm mostly a humanist in general. But I think what's happened is that we should stop calling this communism, because this isn't communism. What they have done was built off the backs. It was built off the backs of communism. This is like the next level. This is even worse than communism, being a globalism and a technocratic dictatorship. So I think a lot of the people need to kind of re-examine how they view what really is happening, because it's not really communism. Because I'm living in Vietnam and it's a communist country and they're not interested in COVID-19. And I'm living in China, which is the complete opposite. And the Vietnam government believes that China has gone in the wrong direction, opposite the world, with their very severe lockdown programs. And of course, I'm also aware that there is an internal battle in the CCP as well, between the old Chinese bloodlines, the Hans and the communists, and Taiwan. So we know that there's something which is going on inside every single government around the world.
Yes, there are lots of big changes on the global and national and local political scene, and it does seem to be that you've got to have good men and women standing up to keep fighting for human rights and for the good of their families, for themselves, for the community, and in order to prevent other interests being pushed that are not in the people's interest.
That's right. We did go over time today, and that's wonderful because it was a very interesting conversation talking with you today. How can people get hold of you, or how can people see your posts online?
I often post in New Zealand politics on Gab. So Gab Social, New Zealand Politics. I'm often posting there.
Wish you all the best in your campaign for the mayor run-up of Dunedin. Just one thing before we go. What do you think about social media claiming that all these new young junior politicians from the freedom movement are very dangerous people?
That's their narrative. The reason for that narrative is because the people in positions of power are concerned that those who are campaigning on behalf of fundamental freedoms, of human rights, those who know what their agenda is and have got their eyes open and they've got discernment to be able to see behind the veil of deception and lies, that the people in power are terrified, absolutely terrified of the masses waking up and no longer being deceived by the lies. They're worried that people might realize what a woman is, what a man is. They might realize that the lies have been about the jab being safe and effective was a lie. They might discover that the families are being attacked, or that the land is being stolen, or that these people we think are our government are actually corporations owned by other foreign shareholders. They might discover that the media is paid for and owned by foreign banking institutions. So these people with the upper class are petrified of the masses waking up, and democracy is all about us speaking clearly, talking about the issues that are in our society and being able to articulate it. Democracy requires the freedom of speech so that you can discuss the narrative and solve the problem. Democracy requires the free movement of scientific information. Democracy requires that the people wake up and they become active. And so they're not lazy with their political rights, that they actively use their political and civil rights to be able to stand up in their communities and make a difference. So what I'd like to see is 1,000 things in my community here in Dunedin. I would like a car parking building near the Octagon, one near the new hospital. I would like to make the roads easier for the traffic to move, the traffic flow along it. I would like to be able to, we're doing massive amounts of spending and getting in huge amounts of debt. I would like to stop that. I would like to stop the transfer of our assets over to another corporation. So there's all these different things. I would like to empower the local community boards and depower the local community networks. So the networks are people are put into position to do stuff there. Meanwhile, the boards are elected officials there. So one, the council is putting potentially Labour Party politicians into those positions. And the other one, the people themselves have chosen them. And so I'm wanting to make sure that democracy actually happens and that the voice of the people are heard and listened to, and that their property is protected, their businesses are protected, their farms are protected, they've got food sovereignty, they've got clean water, and that this is preserved for the next generation. So what it is the elites are just concerned about concerned individuals standing up and using their civil and political rights to defend their human rights.
Pamela Taylor, on fire indeed. On fire. Great. Excellent. Well, you've got quite a bit of what we call spunk to you. So, and you're articulate, you know how to speak your mind. So, I'm looking forward to seeing the result of your run-up to mayor candidacy. Thank you for joining me today. Again, it was fantastic to meet you, and I hope we can get you back a little bit later on and see how things are going. When is the final election that you're running in?
Excellent question. Probably 6 weeks away.
All right, very good, everybody. Pamela Taylor, candidate for Dunedin Mayor. You've been on State of the Nation. Stay safe out there. Keep fighting for freedom and peace.
With this feeling I can leave. I'm working and I'm